Dudes to Dads is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. All right, welcome to Dudes to Dads. Today we have another great show. I think, Alan, though I say that every single show.
It's always a great show.
But today I've invited two fellow dads of part of the Meetup group here in Encinitas, San Diego, California, and kind of wanted to just get some roundtable discussion. We had some great discussions tonight. This is actually being recorded after the Dudes to Dads Meetup, and
It's the actual original part of that, right? The original thing was a Meetup group.
yeah, and it still is. It's sort of the foundation of how I started this was about 2 years ago doing a Meetup group. And for those that don't know what a Meetup group is, you can go to meetup.com. You can create a group related around activities or things of interest. And for me, it was about being a dad, being a husband, and how to sort of navigate that change and that transition from a family or from a single man into a family man. So,
Right.
So I thought it would be an interesting idea. You know, the podcasts we've had so far have been really just about, the various segments and you and I talking about some various topics. But I thought it'd be cool to bring in some of the guys that, we talk to or I talk to on a regular basis and kind of share, some information and some stories that, that they have. So
Sure.
With that, we'll have them say hello. First, we have Scott. Go ahead and just say hello.
Hello.
And then also Nathan.
How you doing?
And you guys can remain somewhat anonymous, your last names. You don't necessarily have to do that.
Very generic names.
Yeah. But so one of the things, I wanted to discuss today was, where you guys currently get advice from, whether it's where or who, when you have issues, whether it is with your children or with your spouse or significant other, who do you turn to, or what is it that you do? Do you go and look on the internet? Do you read books? What do you currently do? Scott, maybe you can start us off. What are some things you do?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny when when my son was still cooking in the oven. I would I got a few books. One of my favorite ones was called Mac Daddy, and it would it talked about
Was that advice somebody gave to you and said, "Hey, go get this
No,
book"?
just I just searched it out. So I read this book and it was cool. It was like here all the stuff you need. It was basically crap you need, crap you don't need, and it laid it out just kind of the way that a dad like myself just likes to understand.
It
absolutely spoke to me. And when he was born. I guess, look, advice is a dime a dozen, and I really wish that I got less of it when I was, when I was there, because I just really don't want to listen to I'm more about the experience, and nowadays, when I go out and hang out with my son, I'm looking around and I'm basically learning from the environment, seeing what other parents are doing, what works, what's not, things I want to put in my bag.
So you're an observer? Would you say you're an observer?
I'm an observer, yeah. I'm happy to.
I would imagine there's a lot of variables because the type of person you are, the type of person that your significant other is, and also the child himself or herself if you have a girl. So there's so many variables that not all advice is going to work in every single circumstance.
Oh, that's absolutely the case. But arrows in the quiver, right? I can take tools, put them in the bag, apply it to my own situation, and I can, I think that every situation is a little bit different. Our kids are different, and
one of the things I didn't say is how old's your son?
Yeah, he's 4.
4. Okay.
Are you a first-time dad? Is your only child so far?
As far as I know.
And Nathan, how about yourself? You have 2 children.
2 children. I have an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. In terms of advice, I was more of a Cliff Notes reader, I guess. I never really read books per se. My wife read a ton of them, but during the baby showers and whatnot, you never got books for dads. Typically, the things that you tend to get are from your buddies, like a 6-pack of beer or something like that. So it's not really
that
popular.
That does help raise the children.
It does.
Here's advice: drink more.
So typically I'd get summary from my wife, but just like Scott was saying, a lot of the advice that probably I heard at the time, I don't recollect. It's more,
Or would you have listened? I think, Scott, we talked about this earlier today. Like, would you have listened if somebody gave you advice anyways?
No, absolutely not. No.
I mean, sort of the mindset of like, nah, I can handle it. I got it, or I'll figure it out. I mean, that's more of a personality type for yourself.
Yeah, but a lot of the advice was so negative too. Like, oh, blink of an eye, the kid's gonna be like, 16-year-old, stealing your car, and then it's off to college, and it's all gonna be gone. And for me, I'm just like, I want to enjoy every moment of it. So I was quick to disregard everything that I heard.
So the advice that we're giving on this show would not be something that you would listen to.
That's fair.
Something like that. No, that makes sense. And then what about the other thing too? I think is Nathan. One of the things you touched on was about books or things for dads. And there are some books out there. I mean, I think the question is, will guys read them? That's another thing. I don't know how successful the books have been. I think they're probably given by women as gifts. Whether it's friends or family members that say, hey, you can use this. What about your peers? It's something of, do you have a peer group that, one, you could go to, or two, would you even do that?
Well, the peer group is this, dudes to dads, quite honestly. I mean, that's
Not
where
that
a
I'm
lot
leading
of the,
you
yeah,
into
right.
a certain,
I mean, that's where a lot of the topics, the discussion come up, and, you get some advice. You have different people that look at the situation in a slightly different way. I think having a healthy group of guys that are experiencing the same thing is always a good thing. But, typically at a bar in a social situation, you don't really talk about your kids in that sort of light. It's kind of, same old, things are fine. To find a comfort zone is a difficult thing.
Yeah,
that's the type of part.
perspective people have that are kind of sharing your experiences with you.
Right.
Like you said, going to a bar and not necessarily you're drunk.
Yeah, I mean,
but also
it's not just that.
or
I
they'll
mean,
complain about
close,
the woman. I mean, a lot of times they will complain about the woman. I mean, if their wife or significant other, they'll be like, hey, if you're out having a drink or something. I mean, but it may not get very deep as far as what can we do about it to solve it. It's more just like bashing or, it's kind of letting out, and you're just there to kind of listen.
Right. That's exactly it. You don't get too far into your problems when you're talking to, your historic, quote unquote, historic best friends or guy friends. It doesn't really get to that level.
Right.
So it is healthy having an outlet like that. Like this type of group, which is the reason I keep coming back, quite honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on is, to see, we're kind of figuring this out if there is a demand for it. I mean, I think, part of the difficulty with the Meetup group has been, I think, the comfort level with guys and dads talking about this stuff. I mean, actually, even before talking, it's showing up. There's a ton of people who are, quote, members of the group who sort of sit by idle, don't come to the meeting. And then we sort of have, a core group of a, handful of guys that are pretty regular. And then there's these ones that sort of come once, twice, not do it. And so I guess for me too, is doing this podcast and doing the group is trying to figure out if there is more of that need, because I know I need it. It just last weekend. I mean, I'm like, you know what? I think I need to go back to some of my classes. I took these parenting classes. I mean, it's never done. Like, it's a constant thing where I feel like I need some more input. I mean, there's new challenges, there's new things. In fact, at tonight's meetup, we had great input from multiple people, some new people, and even gentlemen with older kids. And it was just great to hear that perspective of him being able to look back 10 years or whatever and say, oh, yeah, I totally remember this, and this. And it's kind of, I think that's the dynamics of the group that really makes it interesting, is the sort of, hey, I've been there, I've been through that, and here's what happened. It's not even how to solve it. It's more about just, I went through that as well.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying, Jason, is that it's rare. It's rare for a dad to think that he needs something else, he needs something additional, a support group. My experience has been most dads have the I got this mentality, and
which you just alluded to. You have yourself.
I do.
I mean, but yet you've been a great contributor to the group. You continue to come back. Now, is that more than you feel like because you're able to help other people, or is it also then helping yourself?
No, I mean the group is a component of a couple of things. It's being a dad and also being a partner in a relationship. And it's not that I'm not confident in either. I always want to learn more. It's just my nature.
Yeah.
I think people forget about that part of the relationship, is that it takes two to tango, so you need to have a contributor to make a child, and you're both going to have some hand in raising it, hopefully. So it's nice that you kind of said that. That was one thing I was.
And I don't want to come off as like I know it. I don't. I'm learning this.
But you said you're an observer. You figure it out.
I'm an observer, and I figure it out, and I want to learn from everybody. I take what works, and I leave everything else. I just think in terms of the actual advice, it's been my experience right off the bat that most of it doesn't work. It was negative.
Right.
And so I was quick to dismiss it. Now, if I had another experience where it was all positive and the kinds of things that resonated with me as a person, then I have a different take on it.
Yeah.
So, well, one thing I've often said in coming to this group, and Scott, I think you can relate to this, is what I get out of this is the fact that there's different ends of the spectrum. I'm very much a particular way of thinking about a situation. Scott's a very different way. So it helps to not only be surrounded by like-minded people, but people that take you out of your comfort zone. That's the biggest thing. That's the reason I keep returning to it, because, Scott...
Like there's a bunch of ways to do it right.
Yeah, I mean, Scott takes me out of my comfort zone. He looks at the raising of his child very different than I do mine, not in a bad way, just a very different way, so I get a lot out of that.
You guys, because it's like you ultimately all have the same goal. You want
Right.
healthy, happy children and be, self-sufficient and, everything else, but it's like, you're going down a different road in doing that, and kind of seeing that. It definitely gives a perspective. I mean, in the past, how did you get advice? Before the group,
Well,
did you said you just observed, so you really didn't seek it out.
Well, purposefully, I didn't seek it out. Andrea and I would talk about it. We would just kind of figure it out over the course of time. It would just naturally happen.
I wish I had some of that in me.
Well, and for me, I have a very close family. I have two older sisters and a close-knit mother involved in my life. So the advice came from that. But that's very like-minded people to myself. I mean, obviously, I was raised in that environment.
Right.
So, yeah, and you say a particular set of circumstances, you know what that path is going to lead to, and you just get validation.
Sure.
It's not necessarily good or bad. You just get validation.
They pat you on the back, say, right on.
Right. But, looking at the situation a little different, instead of drawing a box and having a border around your kid, having someone else to reflect on and say, hey, have you ever thought of letting your kid fall outside that fence, go outside that box, let him or she explore what their boundaries are. And that's a unique way of looking at parenting. So by way of getting advice from me in the past before coming to something like this, it was family. And I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
You're close to your brother, your sister, or whomever, so you're going to go to them first and vent to them. They're just going to give you the same advice that they were used to getting from their parent, who you were also raised by, and it's not helpful.
Right.
So
no, that's cool. That's good. I mean, I think sort of wrapping that that segment or that element up. It's the idea that there is a bunch of advice out there. It's not all good. It doesn't always work for everybody, and I think this is what Nathan said is really true. Is everybody has a different way about doing it, and it is sometimes nice to come out of your comfort zone and not necessarily get the advice from somebody who thinks the same way that you do. So that's, I think, partly what we're trying to do here is, make it okay. First of all, for a guy, you can still be cool. I mean, I'm a little less cool than I used to be, but still be, what you think of as a guy, and can still seek out advice and not necessarily have answers to everything. As guys, we talked about that earlier too. Like, we think we have to have the answer to everything. Whether it's our wives or our children or whatever, you think you have to have that answer, and the reality is that you don't. And part of it is figuring it out, being open to other, ideas and other options, and then the idea of actually seeking it out. So,
yeah, I think one of the things that all the dads have to ask themselves, and I think we all ask ourselves in this group, is, okay, out of the share of my life and what I'm doing, am I happy with where I'm at and being a father? Am I happy with what I'm doing, what I'm providing, how I'm participating in my kids' lives? And if the answer is no, then there's some things to do.
Right. Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right on.
Wise words.
All right, so next we're going to talk. Got another question here, which I wanted to get some input from the guys. Is what was the biggest challenges that you faced as a new dad? I mean, if you kind of think back, your kids are a little bit older, but the challenges that you were kind of up against when you were becoming a new dad, and I can share a little bit because I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the group, was exactly why this group was created, was that transition of being this single guy, sort of doing what you want, when you want, whatever, and then all of a sudden being in a relationship and being married and now feeling that responsibility for somebody else, and then adding the dynamic of having a child, and you sort of compounding that responsibility of, wow, I need to provide for these people. I need to, if that's your role, I need to provide for these people. I need to, man up. I need to work hard. I need to, do all these things. And it's a lot of pressure, and in fact, we touched on that idea at the group. So I think, what's the biggest challenge is sort of maybe just realizing that it's going to be okay. And I think, Scott, you kind of touched on that, which you had said about just worry about sort of the day-to-day stuff. I think that's what you kind of touched on.
Well, yeah,
Sure. I mean, one of the things I said, I think we're all built for being parents. So a lot of times we'll get bogged down with the minutia. Do I need to, before the baby comes, I need to outfit the room. I need to get the crib ready. I need to do all that stuff. And that's all garbage. You don't need to do anything. You need to care for your baby when they come home from the hospital and have fun being parents.
Yeah, I think we get bogged down in what I call first world problems. Like Scott's saying, they just need to eat and they'll figure out when they need to poop. And other than that, everything else is just the minutia of the day-to-day life.
Right.
But there was one funny thing that, maybe not funny at the time, but there was something funny that unearthed itself tonight during the group, in which each one of us almost had a different story when our child was first born, that we each lost our jobs, we each had a new house. It was like a perfect hellstorm.
Right.
And look at us now. I mean, Scott's got a 4-year-old, I've got an 8 and a 5-year-old. You get through it and you look back at those and you just go, wow, those were menial, insignificant problems. At the time, they were huge and just upset and ruined my world.
Well, I think it was somebody had said a good business was to look, as if you're a headhunter, look for someone who just had a baby, because they're going to probably lose their job pretty soon. So we're going to move on to another topic. One of the things that was brought up just in this previous conversation was, the idea of different types of parenting and the different, I should say, you're trying to all get to the same goal essentially. But one of the things is sort of the boundaries. And, I think, Nathan, you and I somewhat similar, of pretty rigid, I can say for myself at least, sort of that control, scheduled, type A, however you want to categorize it. Whereas Scott, you have a little bit different from it, especially from the boundary standpoint of, allowing your child to sort of explore. And maybe you can touch on that a little bit of, sort of allowing him to find himself. And it's fascinating. I mean, I'm so intrigued. There's things I wish I could do more. And that's why I like when, we get together, is sort of learning that and some of that, and I try to incorporate some of those things. It's just not, it's weird. It's like it's not in the nature, it's not in my DNA. So it's something that I have to sort of stretch for,
Well, yeah, and I guess I'll have to say that I'm a big believer in natural consequences. I don't take that to an extreme. I'm not having him run around a fire pit with a blazing fire, and if he falls in, then he'll probably learn from that. I mean, I don't believe in that, because I don't have that within me. However, when it does come to climbing and venturing off and doing things, riding a bike, just most recently a skateboard, I don't interfere, and I feel like it's really important for Alex to be able to figure out what works for him and how to do things. And it's worked out wonderfully. It wasn't up until this last summer that I was actually challenged as a parent, and my heart was kind of like jumping out. Like, I don't know if I want him to do that.
Maybe you can share that story.
Okay, yeah. So we will go across the way to a local high school, and we'll bring various things. I'll bring soccer balls, his bike, all these things. But one of the things that's there is stadium seating, and with the stadium seating underneath is the scaffolding, and the scaffolding goes up maybe about 20 feet or something like that.
Keep in mind, he's 4 years old.
He's 4, yeah. So So we would go, and, we do our thing, pitch the baseball, hit the thing, and then he'll want to go around the track. And inevitably, we go around the track, and then he goes underneath the stadium seating where the scaffolding is. And he'll try to do his pull-ups, he'll try to do his things, but then what ends up happening is he starts to look up and goes, oh, he looks up and he starts to climb. Well, and it's been fine because, he would just kind of like mess around in a couple of the different bars. Well, on one instant, it's one of the more over the summer, I was texting Andrea or something, it was probably, 10 seconds or something, and I looked around, I didn't see him. And then I heard this, Papa. I'm like, where the heck is he? I look up, and he's all the way at the top, about 20 feet up in the air. And I'm thinking, this is not, I don't,
This is a 4-year-old boy, 20 feet above on a fence. Like I said, I don't know what I'd be freaking out.
Yeah, so and I kind of started down that path, and I'm like, hold on a second, what am I trying to accomplish here? And I just said, he's like, I started to go up there. I'm like, let me see you get down. He's like, okay. And so he climbed all the way down. He just went all the way back down. And then he climbed back up, and I'm like, oh, then I followed him all the way up. And he looked at me, and I didn't say anything to him. I didn't tell him I didn't want him to do it. I didn't tell him that I was uncomfortable. I just, followed him up there to see it. And he looked at me, and he said, Pop, you don't have to be scared that I'm going to fall. I'm not going to fall. And I said,
awesome.
And I climbed back down and have just, kind of let him do these sorts of things. And to me, it's important because I feel like the more that he has an opportunity to have these small little failures, if he were to fall, or if he were to do something to kind of put himself in check, that it's a lot better that it happens now than later on down there.
How do you judge that risk? One of the things you said, it's different. Okay, he's in an environment where is somewhat safe. This is a scaffolding. There's cement on the ground, broken glass, whatever you had even mentioned. There's like broken glass or whatever. The idea that if he fell, could have been serious, probably seriously injured, if not even
That's
more.
true.
And so I'm saying, how do you judge that?
Well, it's happened over the course of time. We've been taking him to parks. I've been taking him to parks ever since he's been 6 months old, and to have him climb and do certain things. So it's not like he'd done nothing, and all of a sudden he's up 20 feet. It's just that it's the furthest that he had been away with.
But
no
he's pushing
padded.
your comfort zone.
He is, yeah, he is.
Because you obviously have a comfort zone, maybe even for yourself and for your child, and all of a sudden he's now getting to a point, whereas before you were pretty comfortable with everything he was doing.
I was.
So I wonder, as he gets a little bit older, how much more you're going to be challenged.
I might be, but the point is, I'm trying to keep things in perspective. What am I doing? It's not really for me; it's for him. And he does risk injury, I guess, but at the same time, he was completely
he's less inclined to get injured than some other
He
kids.
is. He's completely secure up there. But we just went down to this place downtown. They have this water fountain thing with a new park. He scaled the rock climbing wall, both sides. Up and down. He did it before we could even. He just went up and around and over it. He's a confident kid, So that's, and I attribute that a lot to the way that we handled a lot of the things that he did younger when he was at the parks. We didn't stop him. We didn't show. We allowed him to do the things that he wanted to do. We inspected if he fell down, sure, he'd bounce off the sand or the foam.
And you're talking most of the stuff you speak about is a lot of it's physical.
Yes.
So what about how much that translates into? Now he's in school. Is he starting school?
He is. Yeah.
So is that sort of philosophy moving into a school environment or a more structured environment? How does that work? Because like you said, natural consequences, in which I agree with. So if the child doesn't do their homework, he doesn't do his homework. That's up to him to do it, or is that something? Because that's a debate too. You kind of have to have that line.
Well, fortunately, we have him at a school right now that doesn't have homework and won't for many, 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 many years, and that's something that we have. So it's a choice. It's our choice. So part of it's putting him in an environment that's already in alignment with our values.
Right.
In terms of him getting along with and following the rhythm and routine of his class, it has nothing to do with what we allow him to do physically or otherwise. What we realize is that because he has developed the confidence, his ability to leave us and go to a place that we have deemed trustworthy is easy. He pulls himself together, and he's a smaller kid for his for his age, but he pulls himself together, and he's a very stocky guy, and he's a very strong guy. So he meshes well
His
with older
confidence
kids as
level,
well
like
too.
you said, is good. I mean,
He has a very high confidence
self-esteem,
level.
yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
so that will translate. I mean, it will translate into whatever he's doing. Obviously, you started with the physical part of it, but it
Well-
seems like that will translate well into other areas of his life.
It will, but it's also too. I let him barbecue with me too. So he throws the meat on the grill. He gets to flip things too. And I've talked to other dads. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have my 4 or 5-year-old grilling. And to me, it's nothing. I mean, he takes he participates how he wants to.
Right. Nathan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, see, for me, I'm sitting there biting my
Sweating?
lip. No, I mean, honestly, I've taken a lot of, I guess I'll call them Scottisms, and applied them to my own relationship with my son because they're very valuable. I mean, a different way of looking at the situation. For me personally, though, I mean, I would have never let him get to the second rung. I would have been on top of him that much. But I do have an example. A couple weekends ago, I went on a camping trip with him. And new group of
This is your
guys.
son?
This is my son. Yeah, my son and I. We went on a camping trip with a big group of other dads and other sons, and didn't know the people. He knew one other kid in the group, and I just let him experience. I let him do what he wanted to do, and he went off to a playground. He went BMX biking, and he just did all these things himself. He ended up falling off his bike. In fact, he flattened his back tire. He came walking back with it, and I was so proud because he wasn't crying. He was just in it. And he was disappointed that he had blown his back tire, but other than that, he wasn't complaining about his knee getting skinned up. There was something interesting, though, Jason, that you'd mentioned about how will that apply into your school work. So we've had a very structured, formal, I guess I'll call it, type relationship, parenting style, where we've got a boundary. You don't cross the boundary. That's what it is. But we've been trying to expound that boundary. And my son, he's now in 3rd grade now. And he's starting to have more homework assignments, et cetera. And one thing that we've found is we don't want homework or school to become a chore or to become something that they don't like doing. So what we've done is if he doesn't want to do his homework, or he takes a particularly long time to do it because he's procrastinating, he's doing something else, he's looking at counting the ceiling tiles, I don't know what he's doing in his room, it's okay as long as he gets it done at some point. But I don't want to be that eagle over him. I want him to make the decisions too.
But, okay, so what if he doesn't do it? And that's one of the consequences we talk about. It was actually in the parenting classes where
Right.
The idea is at what age? I mean, there's a certain age,
Right.
obviously, that it's up to them.
So
the
right now,
child's
yeah, I
responsibility.
mean, right now he's doing basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and he has to read every night. But that's about the extent of it. Come on, you can do that. If it gets into, I don't know, that's a fine boundary, and I know we've brought it up here.
What if he
before.
doesn't?
What if he
Right.
doesn't? What if he gets a C in class, but he's
Are you gonna
but
be
he's
okay
earned
with
that
that?
C?
Yeah.
I can't be. That's difficult for me, and this is where Scott and I necessarily may not see eye to eye, but for me, I can't because
here's
they
what I
have
can-
to accomplish,
here's
and
what I
that's
can
one of
tell
the
you, though.
biggest things that you've pulled out of us in this group too, that you've learned from a past parenting class that you've gone to. Why do we put our kids and make them and force them
right.
to
And here's the
excel?
thing: is can you answer this for yourself? Is I was a product of that regimen. I
It
don't
didn't turn out too bad.
Well, thank you. But I will say there are things that I know about my life, and whether that is being stressed and anxiety and tension and the type A-ness of it, that I wish I wasn't as much in my DNA. It hasn't been great. It's, so there are some things that I think, and a lot of it may have been self-imposed as well as, I had great parents, but it doesn't necessarily mean you got to get your homework done and you got to follow the rules and you got to, and there were absolute boundaries all the time. And somehow, maybe through a lot of love and everything else, yes, I developed a good self-esteem and self-worth, if you will, but not without its own challenges. I mean, and everybody has those challenges, but I wonder, I always look back and say, gosh, if I had less of those boundaries and was able to make mistakes, I don't think I don't think I ever felt like I was allowed to make a mistake. And that, I don't know that was even my parents. That's just an internal thing for me of feeling like you always have to be on. You always have to do the right thing. You always have to be perfect in this, and this. You always have to try your hardest. You always have to give 110%.
Right. No, I mean, I
I
was raised in the exact same type of environment where you had to do a certain type of sport. And I'm going through something right now, actually, between my son and daughter. They both got into Taekwondo. They both love it. Son's older, kind of pulled his sister into it. I know she saw Big Brother doing it. She wanted to do it too. But what's happening right now is she doesn't want to do it anymore. She's done. And I have to be okay with that. If I was more the old mentality, I wouldn't.
You're going to finish this season.
You got to finish this.
Yeah.
Which we've said that. You have to at least finish out the month. We paid for it. You got
Don't waste daddy's money.
Yeah, for the cheapness factor, she's got to finish it. But outside of that, fine. Let's find something else that you want to do.
Sure.
So now she's starting to explore and she's starting to say, hey, I'd kind of like to test out gymnastics. Right. Great. Let's
her
take
do
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, I the way that I would handle it is, and this has been the case in the past. I mean, we put Alex in gymnastics early. He decided, after a couple times, I mean, at some point he decided he just wasn't going to do it anymore. So I just pulled him out. I wasn't going to have him finish something and have him to have a bad experience with that because
I'm
I want
cheap,
to.
That's why.
Well, but the thing is, I want to be able to come back to it. And, there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's not that one way is better or worse than another way. It's just we all want to have the most enriching experience. We want our kids to have the most enriching experience, and we want to have enriching experiences with our kids.
Right.
And so it's the way that I have decided that I wanted to do it because I want to be the exact antithesis of how I grew up with my parents. I knew that after I was no longer under their care anymore, there was no way that I was going to raise anybody under that environment.
So for me, I mean, I joke and say it's because I'm cheap, but part of it is to finish what you start. I mean, so that's kind of my mentality. What am I teaching my child if they don't? If you say I have an interest in this and you give it a shot and you fall flat on your face, well, how do you know the second time when you get back on the horse? I mean, there's that saying, get back on the horse, give it another try. If I did that with my son the first time he had broccoli, he'd never be eating broccoli, but now he loves broccoli because I say every time just have another bite. You don't have to finish it, but each time you sit down, we put broccoli in front of you. Have the
I
broccoli.
mentioned my grandma a lot on the show, and she was the type that would encourage things, even if I didn't want to do them. She would kind of convince me to do it in some kind of weird psychology game, and it wasn't like a mean thing. She was just like, well, why don't you have a little bit of this, or have a couple more no thank you helpings, and just call it that. And it actually made me feel, all right, it's for grandma, I'll do it. And then, but then later on, I started adapting that behavior. So like some things are,
So
I
you
would feel
try
like,
new things all the time.
I do.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I go to restaurants. If there's something like squirrel on the menu, I'll get it. But it's one of those things that do you encourage them, and at what point in time do you just say, hey, no, don't do that, and it's okay to bail out? Versus, hey, why don't you go forward a little bit further and see if you really like it? Do you not like it because it's too hard, or do you not like it because it's just something that you're not interested in?
Yeah, but I think, Alan, that you have to answer the question: why are you encouraging? What's the point of the encouragement? Why what do you want to get out of it? Is it would you
Is it for you or for them?
Yeah, would you lay down in front of a bus to have it run over you if your kid didn't do one of these things, or does it just kind of like I could go either way with it? Now I don't want to give the impression that's this unruly circus that happens at my house. It doesn't work like that.
I want to come over
because they're
Juggling, clowns, everything.
But the thing is there are times where it's like, dinner is a perfect example. This is what we're having for dinner. There is no other option.
Right.
You can choose. The option is to not eat. That's it.
I think we're
you
all
can
in
eat
agreement
this,
on that one.
or you cannot eat. That's. So, clearly, the right
some
choice is
boundaries.
made every single time.
Sure. Yes, I like eating.
Well, I mean, really, at the end of the day, and the thing I keep coming back to is, your parents screwed you up. You have issues, and that's what we're trying to correct in this.
You're
group.
talking about people in general, not necessarily me.
Not necessarily
You say
Jason
you,
Crider.
you're
You're talking
looking-
about Jason.
A little bit of
looking
that.
straight at me
Part of it is
and pointing.
Yeah, part of it is, though, you're most likely going to do something to your children. We're trying to overcompensate on the other end of the dial. We're probably, at the end of the day, you're still going to screw your kids up. Some way, shape, and form.
Yeah.
You might as well
Screw
have
them
fun
a little.
doing it.
And that's a wrap. Yeah. That's what that is a great way to end. I want to thank my guests today, Nathan and Scott, as well as my regular guest and host, or co-host, Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for showing up, by the way. I appreciate you being here. It's
Yeah,
kinda late.
guys. That was it is late.
And we're in an
We're-
air-conditioned room that's
We're
not-
recording late, but I do appreciate everyone's time, and this is something that is important. I think we all agree that there's a bunch of different ways, as you said, to skin a cat. But the one thing is we're all committed to putting in the effort, and we all are trying to do the best that we can. I don't know that that's always an answer. My wife and I have that discussion all the time. Well, they're doing the best that they can. Is that really enough? What if all they can do is not really that good?
It's not good enough for a type A.
Right. It's never good enough. So I think we're all just trying to navigate that. So on behalf of everybody, just wanted to say take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks.